I know. See, this is what happens. You start doing stand up for long enough, and then you like don't see
You don't
people
see
anymore.
anybody anymore. Yeah.
It's such a bummer.
It's a thing that you realize that when you're doing open mics and but you hate it because you're like, ugh, like I should have more shows. I want to make money. I want to do all these other things. But then you're like, that's the only time that you really have community where it's consistent. Because all your other friends, it's like, yeah, you see each other here and there, but everybody's busy and everybody's like doing their own life. And you're like, I never see you now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you look great.
Oh, thank you. I was like, I dropped garbage on me on the way here. I've been struggling today. It's been a struggle bus. Yeah.
I like your Austin t-shirt.
Thank you. You know what? I've never done stand up in Austin, but I've been to Austin because I dated a guy from Texas a long time ago.
Hmm.
And I knew Austin back in like 2007 before everybody was like,
Way before it became a thing.
just saying. And I really liked the city. And this isn't even mine. I was cat sitting for a person who went to Austin, and I was like, it was a guy, and I was like, I just need a big T-shirt, and so I just stole one of his T-shirts, and I
That's what
just
men's clothes are for.
thank you.
We're supposed to pillage.
Yes, but it's supposed to be like someone you're dating, and I'm like, yeah, I'm watching your cat. I'm gonna steal your shirt.
It's not a rule.
That's right. Exactly.
Are you dating anyone now?
I am not. I'm on this whole thing where I am. I saw this Instagram thing where they're like, "Oh, describe your love life by using skincare products." And so like everybody was like, "Oh, like I've been using the same product for 35 years." And I was like, "Okay, my thing is that I have there's I'm overwhelmed by a lot of, a lot of products on the market, and I realized that I keep switching all these different products and nothing's actually, helping my skin, and I was like, "Oh, it must be an internal issue." So we are working on things from the inside because mommy's a recovering love addict and mommy's made a lot of mistakes.
Ooh, that's deep.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Are you
That's
dating anyone?
I am trying to. I'm not a particular person. I went out on a date last week for the first time in like a year.
Like from online or
No, I met this one in the wild, which was kind of
wow,
nice. And
that's nice.
I
Yeah.
had been excited, and had been excited for number one, meeting him in the wilds,
Right.
number two, just like actually taking a shot and like flirting with him and seeing if he would ask me out, which he did. So that was very
Yeah.
validating. I hate dating, so I don't really actively do it like
Like what
while.
part do you hate about it?
Oh, God, all of it.
Like getting to know somebody or like the having to like get ready or like the fear or like the how it feels like very vulnerable, like what's like your top part where you're like this is the one I don't like.
My top part is I think that it ends up being a game whether or not I intend it to be, where I feel like
Mm,
I have to abide by certain rules and gender roles, and oh, I can't chase this person, and I can't
yeah.
trigger this thing in him that's going to make him not be interested in me because I'm trying too hard, and like these weird dynamics
Mm,
that kind of
yeah.
are always there even when you don't want them to be.
Right. Where do you think that like came from? Do you think like were you a person that watched like did you grow up watching Sex in the City or did you have like an older sister that like had all the books like, "Oh, men don't like this" or some like or magazines because I feel like so often when I look back, I'm like, I think Sex in the City ruined my life.
I think that ruined my life. And my own experiences
Yeah.
too, because everything I've done in the past hasn't worked out. And I think that's the other reason that I don't like dating is because I have not gotten to a point yet internally where I trust myself and I trust my taste in men. Like
Mm,
I know that when I have that exciting feeling that that's just an attachment
danger.
issue
Yeah,
being triggered, and it's anxiety, it's not butterflies. And so I
totally.
haven't gotten to that place yet where I'm like, oh yeah, I trust that my connection with this person is going to lead me down a straight and narrow path. It's probably not.
Right. It's hard because it's like it's everything's based on our emotions and it feels real. So like when you meet someone and you have butterflies, it really does feel exciting. It really does feel fun. It really does feel, that connection and so you're like I don't know how I could stop myself from that, but then once you have so many instances where it burns out, you're like, fuck. So I have to rewire my brain now and you're like that's it's a lot of work and what sorry I don't know if you're like I don't want to get deep bitch
No, I
but
do.
yeah okay and
Please.
no I do yeah I was like so you know me I'd be asking questions um what is your what was like the relationship with your dad like what was your guys like dynamics
My dynamics, and he is quite a lot of the reason that I have issues, I'm sure.
for sure
Very loving,
Yeah.
does his absolute best,
Mhm.
irritates the ever-loving shit out of me.
Like what? Like, does he chew loud? Is he grumpy?
He would never even discover a podcast, so I can say this safely without it
Oh
getting back
wow.
to him.
Yeah.
He's a little bit like undiagnosed spectrum-y,
Mm.
where he definitely functions through life like with some kind of learning disability. I'll give you
Got
an
it.
example. I have tried to teach this man to use the key fob for his now second or third car in a row that has electronic locks.
Bless.
And he refuses to learn. He always opens the car door with a key. And that's such just like a small
Right.
example, but that's just a really good way of illustrating how he functions.
Right.
And he's very irritatingly traditional. Like I was just home for my birthday,
Mhm.
and it
Happy
was,
birthday.
thank you.
Yeah.
It was the big 3-5, which is,
Wow, you're a big girl.
hate to even
Yeah.
admit as a
Yeah.
woman and
No, but
publicly
you
that I'm
literally
35.
look like you're 25,
Thank you.
truly. And I'm not just saying that, so it's like, just start
Mhm.
lying, Galina.
Yeah, I
Just
don't. I
start
really
lying.
just need to. So anyway, I just turned 29,
Yes.
and my dad, like, two two times in a row, like we had a friend's birthday party, and then we
Mhm.
had like a smaller family one,
Yeah.
and he toasts me, and in both toasts he's just pressing on how he can't wait to like give him grandchildren, despite the fact that we have had so many conversations about how children are not a priority for me,
Yeah.
that if I don't end up having them in a relationship, I'm not gonna like go out of my way to have them. And like the man just doesn't listen to me,
Oh
point
no.
blank.
What is it now? Are your parents still married?
No.
Okay.
That's the other thing, is they were not compatible at all.
Right.
They had a 12-year age difference. They
Damn.
got married after about 3 dates because back in Soviet Russia at
Yeah.
20, my mother was considered a spinster relative to her other friends who got hitched at like 18, 19. So
Bless.
she met him at 20. They had this 12-year age gap. She was like, I guess he seems normal. I guess like on paper he was a catch. He was an engineer and like he
Mm.
was attractive. And
Yeah.
so she married him and immediately was like, oh, this guy's a little fucking weird. What do I do
Yeah.
about this?
And how many kids did they have?
Just me.
Just you. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she was like, "We're done here.
Yeah,
This is the
absolutely.
end."
And so I have no sibling to even bounce this off
Yeah.
of, to be like, hey, can you relate to me about how weird our upbringing was? There is no R. It's just me having to do all the examining of the parent dynamics all by my
Right.
lonesome.
Yeah. And because you came here when you were how old?
5.
5. Yeah. So it's like now you're foreign. Now you're the only child. Now you're also like divorced parents. So it's like there's a lot of like I was like you probably had a awkward ass childhood.
I did. I
You're like,
think that's why I
what?
ended up in comedy,
Comedy.
though.
No, of course. It's like it's always pain, and even like when I meet people where I'm like, wait a minute, like you don't have trauma, but it's like it's still some. I'm not saying that that's not trauma, but I'm saying like other people where it's like they have a good mom, they have a good dad, they have great siblings, they had money
Who
or
are these
whatever.
people?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of them out there because I ask everybody questions and I'm like, wait a minute. But then it ends up being like they were adopted, or it ends up being that they were like I have a friend, she doesn't do stand-up anymore, but she's like drop dead gorgeous. It was Maddie Hansen because I'm like
Mhm.
I'm only gonna say good things about her. But so she's gorgeous, and her family comes from money, and like she has good relationships with other parents, and so I'm like, why do you do comedy? But then I was like, oh, she was the type of girl in high school where she dressed like a 1930s like character, like she loved like jazz. So I was like, oh, she was a big dork. So, like, now we see her as beautiful, but I was like, you were a dork, bitch,
Mhm.
And so she didn't have like friends or she couldn't relate to people or whatever. And so you're like, there's always something where you're like fish out of water or trauma or like strange, like another comic where they had a good family life, but his dad was a doctor in Africa and he's white. And so like he was the only white, so it's like that's a crazy upbringing, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So it's like, yeah, it's very rare where people are like everything was great. My parents are loved. There was nothing weird in my childhood. Cause you're like, you don't belong here then.
Yeah. And I think we typically don't run across those people. They don't end up in the creative field a lot because they don't have something to prove.
Yeah, they have self-love and self-worth and they're like, I don't have to pursue my dreams, aka run from all my pain.
Yeah.
They're like, I feel whole in my heart, so like I can just build my life and get married and have kids
What's
and
that like?
I can't imagine.
Is your dating stuff also dad related?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like my dad was, I mean, he still is. He's an addict. And so and he was very abusive growing up. So to me and to like my mother. So obviously I knew that wasn't right, but in a weird way, did you ever see the movie Fear with Mark Wahlberg?
No.
Okay, so it's a movie where this guy's psychotic and he loves her so much. He's so obsessed that sometimes he's got to kill her friends, you
Wow.
know? And I was like, that's hot. I was like, that's what I like. I was like, you love me so much that you're willing to go to prison. That's how I know. That's how
Yeah.
I know that there's something in him, you know? And so I would either, and my dad, like, he was in jail, he'd be like in and out of our life. So it was always, I chose people who were either emotionally unavailable or I chose people who were abusive. Not always like
Mhm.
physically, only like one where I'm
But
like,
chaotic.
chaotic, exactly, very toxic. And, you know, because to me it was some sort of like, it sounds crazy when I say it out loud now because I'm like, oh my God, if you're young, please don't do what I did. Just learn from my mistakes. But I genuinely thought that it was some sort of romantic gesture that I'm like, this person's so jealous that he's willing to fight this person. Like that means that he loves me so much. Or this person loves me so much that it's like he just gets mad and like calls me names, but then like he's like crying and because he really wants to be with me, to stay with me. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like what is wrong with you? And so yeah, for the last past, you know, honestly, it's only been a few months. I was about to be like the last few years, it's been a couple months where I'm just like I've gotten really comfortable just like being alone, and I haven't had that because I've always been the type of person where you know I didn't have you know good parents. Like both of my parents were like neglectful and like to party,
Mhm.
so I would get all my emotional support from relationships. So I didn't even realize that like I was unknowingly like using a lot of people where I was like, "Oh, yeah, I love him." I didn't love him. I loved the love that he gave me. And I was like, "Oopsie." And so there's probably a few men who want me dead, but what are you going to do?
You came to your realizations. A lot of people never do. That's the thing. Is it's like
Yeah.
you had the awakening. You're working on yourself. You're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around how many people are just like ambivalent to the way
Mm.
that they function in relationships, in the world,
Yeah.
and they just walk around blindfold on. And as I've been on my own like journey with therapy and with trying to be better and with figuring shit out, definitely not till more into my 30s,
Yeah.
but I've had to step out of like even friendships because people are not keeping up to pace. They're not like taking accountability for their actions. They're still
Yeah.
fucking around and not finding out, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't be in relation with these people anymore.
Yeah, it's the tough part about growing up because when we were younger, you would look at your parents and you're like, "Oh, how come they don't have friends anymore?" And you're like, "Oh, they don't have social media. They don't have a way to connect." But it's like we do, and you're like, why do these friendships start to, you know, disintegrate?" And you're like, "Oh, you some people outgrow people." And that's the real truth. It's like, you know, I have friends now and I'm sure you do too in comedy where not just comics, but where you're like you are self-sabotaging yourself and I can't continually like sit here and not say something and you know you feel like you're enabling these people. You're like, dude, you're drinking all the time, you're eating like shit all the time, you're angry at everybody, you're blaming everybody, and like you as an individual are not getting better, but then you're like, oh, like I should be getting this and I should be getting that, but it's like, why do you deserve it? Like you're not doing anything for yourself. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so I really do feel like, and I've had to do so much fucking work on myself. I still battle with a lot of like resentment and like anger issues towards strangers who have no idea, you know,
Me
where I'm
too.
just like, yeah, where I'm just like, and it could just be like, oh, you had a mom that loved you, and I'm like, you're spoiled, bitch, and it's like, what? You know what I mean? Like where I've had to like really like work on that ugly side of myself, and but it's so irritating to me when I watch people and I'm like, all you have to do is like have enough like discipline and like have enough, you know, awareness to be like, hey, it's just an active daily choice. Like, yeah, if you wake up and the first thing you do, you scroll on your phone and then, you know, you're again like eating shit and then you just go out and you drink all night and then you're not working on your jokes or whatever it is and you're like where what progress you just want some external person to see you and be like, "Hey, you're a star." And you're like, you don't even have enough love for yourself to take care of yourself. So it's like, w- why do you think that like things are going to work out?
Yeah, and I think a lot of our peers overestimate how much power some of the other people in the community have.
Yeah.
So, I've heard friends really just like stewing in their bitterness, being like, "Oh, I can't believe this person got this and they didn't even take me and they didn't even like tell their reps that they should check me out." And it's like they're not doing it to you.
Yeah.
They're not saying, "Oh, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate him. I'm not going to help him." They're just living their lives and thinking about them.
Totally.
And it's actually really freeing to just accept how little other people think about us. Like, it is
For sure.
such a blessing to be like, "Oh, no one cares about anything I'm doing. They're not judging me nearly as harshly as I'm judging myself. They're
Yeah.
also not intentionally fucking me over. They're just simply not thinking about me."
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah. Seriously. And it's like, and even if people are thinking about you, it's a thing of where it's like, at what point do you take accountability and do you take responsibility that why do I care if they do?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like when I think about the people who, yeah, maybe I did have a falling out with a person and maybe they were wrong, but I go, why am I so concerned with how this person perceives me? Like that's what matters more. Instead of me going up to a person and confronting them and be like, why did you say this or why didn't you help me? It's why do I care that they
Yeah.
are this person? Why do I care that, you know what I mean? Because like that's where your power is. It's like it's so annoying because it's like, but you're like, but this person did do bad. They did backstab me. They did fuck my ex boyfriend. But at the end of the day, it's like you give it power. You know what I mean? If I'm being like, fuck her, she's a bad person, she fucked my ex boyfriend, da da da, because you did, you know, and you're just like, so what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm constantly walking around with that, like, it only comes back to me.
It's true. You get to choose how much you want to harp on it and
Yeah.
stew in it and not like. I I always have conversations with people about forgiveness and that it is like for you and not for them.
Yeah.
And I have struggled with it myself, but
Yeah.
now it's like I don't want to carry it and I won't forget. Like I'll
Yeah.
I'll now avoid that person like the plague or I'll do whatever it is to cut them out, but like
Totally.
I'm not going to stay mad at them because I went through a really long period of having people that I'd had some issue with
Yeah.
and I would think about them and I would think about the issue and I would get mad like it had just happened.
Totally.
And I'm like, this is stress on my body. This is
Yeah.
making me feel terrible. I cannot keep getting reignited every time I think
Yeah.
about this
And they're on a
conflict.
boat in a bikini and they're like, woo,
Yeah.
like they have no idea. And you're just like over here like trying to fucking hang up your clothes in your closet angry, you
Yeah.
know? And you're like, well, that
Ruining my own day for no reason.
yeah. And it sucks because it's like that resentment is so real. And this is like a real thing that, like, I mean, I literally, it's so funny that we're talking about this. Last night, I could not sleep and my allergies were acting up. But I knew it was like something bigger. And I was like, I was at I was out like supporting like a friend's show yesterday and I saw a couple people. I'm like, that person bothers me. Like, that person bothers me. And then I went on a spiral. I'm like, and then this person,
Mhm.
and they did that. And then I was like, a whole hour. So I was like, just write it out. And I just like, literally just like wrote out. And I was like, the list is long. But I'm like, I got my grandma, I got my grandpa. I got so many people on this list where I started writing it all out. And I was like, okay, at the end of the day, besides for like your childhood trauma, because you're a kid, you can't help that. But everything else where I'm like, is you can find where it's like you could have you could have cut that off. Like I knew this one person where you're like, okay, this person's kind of, shady or they're manipulative, but they're going to bring a bunch of people out to this show. So I'm going to work with this person because they're a good this.
Mhm.
And then when they screw me over, why am I surprised? You knew who they were, but you worked with them because you were like, I see the benefit, how it benefits me, and I'm willing to subject myself to this person's behavior for the thing that I want. And now that it blew up in my face, there's nobody to blame but me. And I go, okay. Oh, I'm like, well, but this person, they they were rude and like they're really like mean and they're this and they're that. And I go, so why did you keep working with them? Well, because I was getting paid and I was getting stage time. Okay, but you knew this person was rude to you. So you wanted your stage time. So you pretended like everything was okay. So it's like, why don't I have to take accountability for being like, hey, like you subjected yourself to that?
Yeah, people would rather play victim and have I learned about this thing in psychology class in college and it's like one of the few things that I learned in college that actually stayed with me that
Yeah.
comes up every day, but it's like internal versus external locus of control,
Mhm.
where internal locus of control is how do I take accountability? What's my role in this? Blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
external is, oh, my life is so messed up because this person did that and this circumstance that and the world is this way. Anyway, for people who, particularly in Hollywood, because it's so recurring
Yeah.
within the industry, where it's, I don't know the details of like the Kevin Spacey situation, but in
Yeah.
situations where someone is a predator,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, like a lot of victims do continue to place themselves in these situations where
Totally.
it's like, you already got hurt once by this person, but you think they can do something for you, and you're
Mhm.
excited about the rooms that they can get you
Baby
in or the
reindeer.
jobs they can get you. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just keep putting yourself in that situation,
Yeah.
and it's like, I want to be compassionate and I want to understand where they're coming from, but
Mhm.
like, at what point, right? At
Yeah.
what point is it like, you are doing this to yourself?
Yeah.
Stop showing up in front of this person's door.
Totally. Yeah. And that's the thing is it's like, I mean, I was that person for sure. Like in many situations where I'm like, hey, it's because you like when you're a person, especially if you have like trauma or something, you then tell yourself that you're strong and you go like, "Oh, I can handle anything." So even if I know somebody's a predator or whatever, because I've already had this past, I can handle it because I'm getting mine. Like you think you're like, "No, I have control of the situation." So I'm gonna give the example of baby reindeer where you're like, yeah, I know this person can open doors. I know this person can help my career. I know this is going to change my life. So if this person is going to, harm me, it's okay. I can handle it. I've done it before, but then I'll get what I want. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, that's just low self esteem, is where you think that you have to submit yourself to pain in order to get something. And it's like, no, there is a possibility of you getting what you want without subjecting yourself to that
Might
type of
take
pain.
longer, but it's going to cause
It
less damage.
yes, it's get less damage, less resentment, because I feel like so much of learning is arriving, and unfortunately, I've been a person where I learned by consistent failure, and then it got to a point where I'm like, it's like you hit rock bottom so often where I was like, should I just move here? Like, do I just live at rock bottom now? Do I just get a place because I'm here all the time, like pretty much every day, This back in the day, but then I was like, so then I have to be preventative of how not to get to rock bottom. And how you be preventative, it sucks, but it's discipline.
Yeah.
It's being like, fuck, I got to meditate every day because when I meditate, I take the time to not get on a wrong train. And you know what I mean? And so I got on a wrong train. Okay. But it's a thing of where you go, okay, now I know that like when I meditate, I don't sit here and like let myself spiral in bad thoughts. And then I eat healthy because then I don't feel like shit. I don't drink all the time because then I'm not eating late at night. I'm not sleeping in. I'm not, missing out on my stuff the next day. And then it goes, okay, when I know that this person is using me, and I know that they're not a good person, but I no longer continue to have a person in my life just because that they're serving me something if I'm not willing to vouch for them. But in my past, I'm like, yeah, they're this, that, but that's okay. I'll just have them do this, or I'll just
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put them in this box. That box is gonna get open.
Yeah.
It's gonna get open, and it's gonna get open in a way where it's a motherfucking liability. And guess what? Everybody's gonna look at you like, oh, I heard this guy was touchy. You're like, what? And you're like, you knew they were a little shady, not in
Mm-hmm.
that way,
Yeah.
but you knew they were shady in other ways. Well, guess what? If they're shady that way, they're probably shady in other ways too.
Yeah.
You
I've
know?
almost had the opposite problem. I mean, certainly this is a thing that I've questioned myself on as I've gotten so far into stand up, and I'm like not necessarily where I thought I would be.
Yeah.
I because of my upbringing
Yeah.
probably am so extra paranoid with people and
Yeah.
with safety concerns and with bad
Mm.
vibes, and I even before I understood what that meant, I was very very walled up. And there
Yeah.
were people that were around that I would see other people gravitate towards and then get things because they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm going to be close to this person because they're a stepping stone on the ladder and that's going to get me here."
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh my God, should I have been nicer to so and so? Because they could, maybe I'd be further ahead now. And it's like, no, because I
No.
had a bad feeling about that person in the first place.
Yeah.
And if it has to take me longer because I stood my ground and was like, I'm not going to pretend with a
Yep.
person that I know I don't like, it is what it is.
Yeah. No, that's smart and that's the right way. And I was like, for me, it was never like necessarily because like I'm very confrontational and like if I don't like somebody, it's like they damn well know. But it was more so of like I was always compassionate and forgiving because I'm like, well, I had a traumatic childhood. Well, okay, yeah, this person, they did this or whatever, but everybody deserves forgiveness. But after you forgive people for a long time, you're enabling then.
Mhm.
You're like, okay. And then they bite you and you go, well, what the fuck? I was a person who showed you compassion and forgiveness and I helped you and gave you a chance. And it's like,
They don't value those things.
no, of course not. And then you just go, you know what? Now, like, I mean, pretty much since the pandemic, I've been so much more to myself. I used to love everybody. I used to be like, I'm always trying to find the great in everybody. I'm like, this person's this and they have that and like they work really hard, or da da. And I'm like, I have to stop doing that because now it doesn't mean you can't see the good in them, but it doesn't mean that you have to work with everybody or you have to like invite people into your inner circles because I was very trusting, would tell everybody anything about myself or whatever. And, just an open book. And then you're like, whoa, you're now telling people my business, you're whatever. And I go, but you knew
Mhm.
this person was that and you gave him a chance because all you ever wanted in life was someone to give you a chance. So now you're giving all these motherfuckers who don't deserve it a fucking chance, you
Yeah.
know?
What are your red flags?
My red flags for dating or friendships or just like anything.
Any, but primarily dating too, even though you're like on a break right now.
Yeah.
Now that you've grown, what are
Yeah.
you like, ooh, won't do
Ooh.
that again?
Yeah. Pretty much like my red flags are somebody who to me like health like doesn't have discipline in health because like to me that's gonna pour over into everything if you don't have the discipline to be like, hey, I know that like this is poison and like I get it, 80-20 rule, but it's like if you're constantly eating like junk food or you can't cook for yourself or you don't have groceries, like it's just it to me, I'm like, oh, you don't want to grow up, like you don't want to take care of yourself, you don't realize that you have to be accountable for yourself in the future. Like you're gonna get cancer. Wait, how you gonna be my kid's dad and you have diabetes, like whatever. And I'm like, you gotta take care of your health. So like that's like a first thing. If someone doesn't take care of their health, I don't care if it sounds it's like my dad has a fucking trailer. Like it's not like I'm being a bitch. It's just very unattractive to me. And I'd say like another big red flag for me is someone who is I don't like people who need external validation. Huge turnoff for me. If people don't have a backbone and they don't have integrity and they're always like needing to, have people clap for them. For a man, I'm like it's really gross to me.
Yeah,
I'm like,
agreed.
oof, yeah.
I
What are
like
yours?
that, the health one. It's
Yeah.
like I've probably always just on a superficial level thought that anyways and thought, oh, I'm not going to connect with someone that doesn't take care of themselves,
Yeah.
but to view it through that lens of it's a bigger indicator of lack of discipline, lack of accountability, like,
Yeah.
and I'm going to have to mother you at
Yeah.
some point.
That's the thing is anytime I dated a guy like that, because they're usually the funny ones. Um, it's like, oh, I have to mother you. You don't know how to go grocery shopping. You don't have mayo or soy sauce in your damn fridge. Like you don't know how to cook. Like I don't want to like. And people are like, oh, that's stupid. That's you're focusing on the wrong things. And I'm like, no, that your health is your number one thing. Like how like that's number one. I don't want to be in medical debt
Yeah.
because like you couldn't put Twinkies down. You wanted to eat McDonald's egg McMuffins and Bang energy drinks. No. You're going to get a heart murmur. It's like and it's not even like where I just want someone who I naturally like to eat healthy. Like I like spinach. I like a fucking salad.
Hmm.
It's cold, it's easy, it's hot outside.
Anyone can like it if they just train themselves to like it. You get used to whatever's in front of
For
you.
sure, but like, how do you not like sushi? It's healthy.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many things that I'm like, you can find something that's healthy that you like. I'm not saying you got to eat granola and you got to eat an acai bowl. It's like you find what's healthy for you. But like, I literally dated a guy where he every day would eat McDonald's breakfast and a
How?
Bang energy drink. I'm like, he's like, oh, who cares? Like and I'm like, I care because I want to get married and maybe have kids, and I don't need someone. I don't want my kids eating that. I just don't. Like, I don't know. Maybe that is incredibly controlling, but I'm like, I know that it's poison. So I don't want to. Oh, and someone who big into drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't like if someone tried cocaine, I'm like, I'll probably never date you. I know it's
That's
super
fair.
judgmental,
No,
but it's
it's
like
fair.
my dad was a drug addict. Like I've seen it like ruin my childhood, and I'm like, even if you're like, oh, it's just once in a while, yeah, I don't like it.
No, it's your learned experience. The
Yeah,
crazy thing for me, without having like dealt with substance abuse issues myself
yeah,
or in my family,
yeah,
but we all know like alcoholism doesn't mean there has to be alcohol present. But
totally.
I do have a history of like gravitating towards addicts.
Oh,
Yeah, I
really?
do.
Yeah,
In
I wonder
friendships and
why.
relationships alike. I don't know why. They are like the kindest people. Not
Hmm.
always, but
Yeah.
there's something about addict
Oh,
personalities
wow.
where I am just like a fly to it,
Yeah. I
moth to the flame.
I wonder because you said if I wonder if it's like maybe I don't know, I'm literally just making this up. But if it's maybe because you were the only child and maybe cuz addicts are I feel like addicts are very present. Like they're
Hmm.
very present people because it's like they have to be because it's
Yeah.
like there's a consistent like discipline that they have to maintain in order to stay alive. And so I feel like maybe they're like giving you like some type of like energy that like you probably like weren't used to if your dad was like kind of not, as emotionally present and then I'm not sure where your mom was. So I was like maybe yeah, that's interesting cuz I've been the opposite. I stay away from addicts because
Hmm.
and I dated one who was a recovering addict and I was like that addiction, it transfers into other
It
things.
does.
It really does. And as much as like the person can work on themselves and all that stuff, and I'm not saying that they can't, like have happy, healthy relationships. Of course they can. But if you're a person who comes from an addict, childhood, like from a parent, and then try, it's so hard. So it's like I unfortunately could probably never date someone who has addiction issues ever again.
Yeah. Well, for the best. I think
Yeah.
for me, it's my like ever present, I can fix him thing.
Yeah.
That's part of it where I'm like, well, you're an addict now. Just wait till I get my hands on you. You're still going to be an addict. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
have to be like, oh, oops.
Yep. And do you think that it's like flattering where you're like, oh, like if this person changes for me, like that
Hmm.
must mean that like I'm,
I'm worthy of them changing
yeah,
themselves. Yep.
yeah, no, for sure.
I
And
mean, none of those relationships have worked out.
yeah,
So,
it's hard. And it's like, yeah. And you also don't want to be judgmental because you're like, yeah, like and I've dated poor guys my whole life. You know what I mean? Cause it's like I've been a poor comic, like whatever. And it's like, but at some point you're like, we both can't be poor.
yeah.
One of us needs to be financially stable. So it's like, yeah, I've liked comics or I've liked artists my whole life, but I'm like, it's a red flag, girl, because somebody needs stability.
Hmm.
Like we want Christmas presents for these children.
Yeah.
Who's getting them?
Not me.
Not me. Everybody's getting a handmade, paper mache doll. I don't know, but it's
Hmm.
like I need. It doesn't have to be rich, but it's
Right.
like I just need you to have job security because I
One of us
don't.
has to.
Yeah, totally.
When did you start? And I mean this in a good way because I
Yeah,
consider myself very woo woo, but
yeah,
like,
yeah,
when did you get into all of that and how woo woo are
yeah.
you?
How woo woo are you? I think it. So I've been meditating for 10 years,
Wow.
and yeah, so I've been meditating for 10 years, and I got into it because I couldn't pay my rent. And I was living by myself in Larchmont, and I was like, fuck. And I was like, I mean, I was applying for all these jobs, and like every day, like, there's nothing was happening. And I kept hearing this little voice go, meditate. And I was like, I don't know how to fucking meditate. I was like, no, like, shut up. And then I was like, still doing the hard way, like trying to like get a job, like showing up, like putting padding in my bras, like going in, like, you got a job for me, like just trying anything. And then I keep hearing this voice, like, meditate. And I was like, oh my God, fine, I'll fucking meditate. And so like I didn't even know how to do it. I just like lit a candle and I was like, all right, I'm doing it. And then you know how you have a relationship with the universe.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. But that night I went to bed and I had this dream that I was in this casino and a girl was walking by and she was like, oh, I heard you're looking for a job. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, you should take my job. She's like, I'm quitting. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, where is this? What casino is this? And like as I'm saying it, I'm starting to wake up. And then I'm like, okay, I could like see my bedroom, but I could still like hear this voice in my ear. And it was like, LA's friendliest casino. And I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't think anything. I was like, all right, it's just a dream. But then I went on my computer and I was like, maybe I should look at casinos or whatever. You know how like Google has like the
Hmm.
sidebar ads or whatever. And I see Commerce Casino, LA's friendliest casino. That was like their
Nuh-uh.
motto. Yeah. and I click on it, and I swear to God, they had just posted a job ad for a cocktail server 3 minutes before, and I got the job.
Whoa.
And then from that point, I was like,
You
"Whoa."
can't not believe after
Yeah.
something like that happens to
I
you.
was like, meditation is real.
Yeah.
And I just learned that I was like, okay, the more I meditate, you're not, because people think it's magic or
Mhm.
mystical, and it's like it's not. Your brain is in there's four type of brain waves, and meditation just helps you get into a brain wave where you're not as anxious, you're not as stressful, you're not as analytical. You're able to like calm down, and when you calm down, you're then able to receive just vibrational patterns that are in, our atmosphere, just like oxygen is, we can't see it. And you're just able to like process information at a level to where you're not have it's not like an emotional reaction, or it's not like an analytical like situation. And so yeah, so I've been meditating for 10 years, and there's like times where I've like, like fallen off a little, but I try every day to like make sure like the first thing that I do, I also pray. I was like, I
Mhm.
pray and I meditate because like I said, I had hit and rock bottom so many times in my life, and I'm
Why
like,
not cover all your bases?
seriously. And I was like, and people are like, I don't believe in God. I was like, he don't believe in you either. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that. I'm just kidding. But I'm just like, it's a thing where it's like a lot of the times people believe in God or people go the woo woo or whatever, and it's like it's pain, boys and girls. It's failure. It's
Mhm.
it's what happened. If it's suffering. If you're like I'm not woo woo, I'm like probably got a good life.
Yeah.
You don't have to. So for the rest of us that like, hey, some shit happened or we had, like neglect or whatever it was from our childhood, it's like you have to have something. It could just be placebo effect. If I died and there was no God, I wouldn't care that I prayed every day. I wouldn't care that I meditated because I would still know that it's a placebo effect that has like helped me maintain the discipline, help me, just be like, okay, God's watching me. So, like, let me not have these relationships that are just, fulfilling in an addiction. Let me not, work with people who I don't respect. Like, it just helps keep that in place. So, it's like, whether God's real or not, it's like the discipline that I have in my life has gotten so much better. So,
That's the lens that I look through it too, because I got real into manifesting,
yeah,
which people are like, it's trying to do magic. Da, da, da." And the way that I explain it is I'm like, worst case scenario. And my form of doing that is just saying, I can pay for whatever I want.
yeah,
I can do this. I have people that love me. Things are going well. This is easy. Just saying
yeah,
things are the way I want them to be, as
totally.
if it's actually real. And while I have had these little weird instances of
Hmm.
very literally pulling super specific things in,
Yeah,
outside of that, the way that I justify it is I'm like, worst case scenario, let's say none of this is real. Let's
yeah,
say energies, vibrations, blah, blah, blah. None of it is real. What I've done is cognitive behavioral therapy on myself,
yep,
where I am saying things positively instead of negatively.
yep.
Worst case scenario, that's what I'm doing.
You're like, yeah, I mean, and first of all, it was like, we know it's not, we know science, we know physics. You're like, we know energy and vibrational patterns are real.
For
And
sure.
so you're like, it's just like it's like, I've seen it happen in my own life. And it's like, I mean, look at, hello,
Yeah,
you're in the studio.
I know. I pulled this in
Yeah, you pulled this in for free, guys.
for
You don't
free.
pay.
Spotify, you guys.
Okay. Like, so it's one of those things where it's like it's just like hypnotizing yourself. You're like, I am rewiring my mind because it's everything starts in your brain. So if I'm in a bad mood and you invite me to a party and you're like, hey, come to the party, and I'm like, no, I'm in a bad mood. I'm not like feeling it. And I'm like, okay, so that's the time I'm on now, right? But if you go like, hey, come to this party, and I go, you know what? Let me try to say something good's gonna happen. And maybe nothing good happens. Maybe I just have a good time.
Hmm.
Is that so bad? Or I go, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go to this party. I'm going to have a good time. I start meeting people. I talk to people. I need a job. And someone's like, oh, hey, like we're looking for an assistant. How often does that happen
Yeah.
where everybody goes, it's who you know, it's who you know? And those are the people who try to like force relationships. But it's like, no, no, no. It's the people you already know. And then you go to the fucking mommy picnic park, and you're not even a mom, but you just go with your friend, and then someone's like, oh, hey, like I need a nanny, and we're going to pay you this amount of money. And you're like, oh, amazing. Like, what if I didn't go? What if I stayed in that bad mood? And it doesn't mean that like you can't ever have a time where it's like you need to just sit home and watch Little Mermaid and eat cookies. It's like, of course you can have those moments. But the point is, it's like that constant like little switch of going like, okay, I am mad, I am upset, but what is the positive one little thing that I could switch because that opens up a new timeline.
Right. And I always try to give things credit to when they happen,
Yeah.
when something happens that then validates the point of, oh, I said something good was going to happen and it did. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm driving around a parking lot and I go, parking is always so easy for me. I always get a good spot. And then I do. And then it reinforces the idea for me of exactly this is why I
Yeah.
do this.
Totally. Because it's just like, I mean, I'm such a big believer that, there is a matrix or some sort of
Me
system
too.
where it's like, hey, at the end of the day, it is ones and zeros, and like everything is not physical in, on earth in this three-dimensional realm. It's physical, but it's like it's not in some other form. And so it's like when it's in that energetic form before it's physical, you're like, that's in that meditation or in your prayer, like that's what you're trying to like fix, so that when it is physical, you've already kind of like created the through line for it to come in,
Yeah. And then your intuition is lined up for it. So you
Yeah.
might go to a place where you maybe wouldn't have gone earlier, or talk to a person that you wouldn't have talked to, and then there's opportunity at the end of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I try to, because people are like, oh, like all these girls are like into astrology and whatever. And you're like, you got your DNA test done. Like, we're all just trying to figure out what the fuck we are, to try to understand ourselves, to try to, gauge, like, why do I do this? It's the same thing. You go to therapy. It's like, you do astrology, you do it's like, we're all trying to have some sort of thing. It could be you join a fraternity. It's like, we're trying to have some program, something in place, whether it's education, whether it's astrology, whether it's family, whether it's DNA, where you're like, how can I see what I am? How do I see my flaws? How do I see my strengths? And how do I make this reality into the best possible version that I can? That's all you're doing,
Yeah.
So it's like, whether astrology is real or not, who cares? If she's like, okay, I feel like, okay, this might be why I'm depressed right now, or this might be why I'm very anxious. Now, if you're just like, oh, I'm just jealous because I'm a Scorpio, and you don't do any work on yourself, no. But if it gives you some sort of like, oh, okay, like Scorpios are jealous, possessive people, like, okay, I understand myself. Maybe let me bring that up now in therapy, and you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just information for us to try and like understand. I hate when people give women a hard time for liking that shit. So I'm like,
Hmm.
first of all, women have been powerful healers since the beginning of time. Okay. And we're taking our power back. Thank you. And second of all, it's like, the shit works.
This shit works.
The shit works.
Anything that helps you learn about yourself and as long as you're like reasonable about it, because
Yeah.
there's levels to things that completely are scientific. Like, I haven't been a big, the reason I'm not an astrology person is
Yeah.
because I'm a Gemini and people have talked shit about Geminis for as long
Yeah.
as I can remember. So I've set
Totally.
that aside. But there is something to, oh, your birthday is at a certain time of the year and I have a summer birthday. And so
Yeah.
that means I can like really relax and enjoy the summer. Like, sometimes it fell on finals week and then that had an impact on my life. And it's similar to like Malcolm Gladwell's like, what was the one, the big book?
I'm not
First
sure.
Important. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Like, it was
But it's
important.
the one that's like about the 10,000 hours, that book
Oh,
of
okay.
his,
Yeah.
where, and I don't know, maybe some of it is pseudoscience, whatever. But he
Yeah.
basically just like has an example of, oh, people who are born in January ended up better at hockey when they were small because a 5 year old who's born in January versus a 5 year old who's born in August is much bigger. So
Right.
those kids, there's like more January birthdays on
That
hockey
makes
teams
sense.
because those
Yeah.
kids are better, then they get preferential treatment, blah, blah, blah. Because when you're that small, your age by months does matter.
Yeah.
So there's things to like, oh, if you have a Christmas birthday and you're constantly getting neglected and like feeling neglected about your birthday because it's on Christmas, that
Yeah.
is going to seep into your personality. Like, I
Totally.
don't care how much you want to put it on, it's a Capricorn, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there is an effect on a person's personality based on when their birthday is,
Oh, of
period.
course. I mean, that's the whole thing, is it's like when people give people a hard time about astrology, it's like, okay, well, astronomy and, the farmer's almanac, it's all based on the positions of the stars at the end of the day. Now, of course, when the scientific method like it was introduced, a lot of the stuff you're like, okay, this doesn't fit into that. But there's a lot of things that don't fall into the scientific method that just now of recently we've been able to investigate more because the technology has like caught up with spirituality. When people have talked about meditation for thousands of years, they didn't have the ability to scan people's
Right.
brains, but now they do. They have because the EKG machine measures your
It's
heart,
the
and
heart one.
EEG I think is the
Yeah.
one for your brain, and it's like they have the scans and they're like, whoa, this actually scientifically now is showing that this works. And so it's the same thing, like they did a test with like when somebody dies, they have some sort of machine that can still sense the energy, the presence of like a person there. And so you're like, oh, okay. So like there's something still happening as if it was connected to a live person. So it's like science isn't, oh, we can't. They didn't know that there was other planets in the goddamn, they thought it was just our solar system. They also thought the earth was flat, or some still do. There's tons of things that it's like science has to catch up. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like they knew about fucking, again, like meditation thousands of years ago. So it's like sometimes when people are like, well, it's not science, you're like, science isn't always the thing. Like we just got cell phones, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's a thing of where it's like, yeah, like give it a second. Now, I'm not saying you're like, oh, this star is here, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like it's pattern recognition. Farmers go, hey, in the fall, we got to do this because the soil's the best. It's going to produce the most. That's how we prepare for winter. It's like it's all based on natural elements, and it's like now I'm never a person like, oh, you're a Capricorn, I'm never going to do it like that, but I'm a type of person that I go, okay, there's some sort of patterns here that people for thousands of years, started to they're like, okay, we noticed that when it's summer, most of the women are more fertile. So there's something happening where it's easier to have a baby at this. It's like that's how people,
Hmm.
learned information for a long time, is just by recognizing patterns. So it's like
We're
when people,
literally designed for pattern recognition.
yeah. So
It's
when
how
people are
our
like,
brain is structured.
yeah. So you're like, I get like when people say it. Now like I don't check my astrology. Like I
Hmm.
don't, because I'm the type of person, I'm like, I don't want to know the future. I want to be as present as possible. So I don't like being like, oh, let me, and again, I'm not
And
knocking
because so
women.
much of that is just capitalist, like, oh, I happen to be an astrology writer, so I'm just going to pull an article out of my ass. It's not based on anything.
Totally. So it's like I get those elements of it. And but yeah, like if there's like, something like a full moon, I'll pay attention to,
Hmm.
because like my sister was a nurse. Like she's like, it's and I have I dated a cop a long time ago, and he was like, "Ugh, it's full moon," like, and they know because they're like, hey, we recognize that when that moon is full, we get a lot more stabbings, we get a lot more shootings. My sister's at the hospital, she's like, hey, a lot more health injury. It's just like I don't know what it is, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, but there's something about that energy that is in the air. Again, we breathe in oxygen, whatever it is, that something's intensified. But it's like it could just be every 30 days. Might not be the moon, just might be, hey, every 30 days, things like this
Right.
happen. And people are like, oh, it's a full moon. They put those two things together. But it's like, yeah, eventually you just start to pay attention to it. You're like, something's here.
There's no denying how real energy is because everybody has had the experience of you're all sitting in a room, someone who's angry comes in, the atmosphere changes.
Immediately.
Yeah. Everyone has had that experience, or the opposite. Someone passes and everyone's like, oh, they lit up a room because they had good energy. Like,
Yeah,
it is a tangible thing.
totally. Yeah. And it's just like, it's just, yeah, it's just how you subscribe and like how you explain how things happen. It's like we all can have, I feel like art, or I feel like spirituality and science, they're two different expressions of the same thing. So like a scientist is going to be like, "Oh, love is oxytocin, blasting off like through your hormones, whatever." I don't know enough science, but they can explain it in a way where it's all specific definitions. You're like, okay, but then someone who's spiritual is going to be like, okay, love is like the emergence of comfort and vulnerability. You're like, you guys are explaining the same thing. You're
Hmm.
just you're on this side of it, and this person's on this side of it. And so it's like, it's like I love science. I love people who, have the ability to like make us like, wait a minute, like how do we build up our immunity? Like how do we like take care of our gut health? Like cuz like somebody's got to tell us,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? But then it's like you love spirituality too because it's like, hey, these practices have worked for people for thousands of years, and you're just trying to balance the both of them,
Yeah.
you know?
It's so true. Do you have any conspiracy theories that you think are true?
I think I am a recovering conspiracy theorist addict. I at one point in my life thought I was supposed to solve September 11th. When you go through that phase in your life.
As we do.
I'm trying to think of like one that I heard. Well, here's my thing with conspiracy theories. Well, because we live in Hollywood
Mhm.
and everybody's like the Illuminati, like la la la, which I do think there are elements of it that are true. But it's annoying when people are like, everyone in Hollywood's a pedophile. I'm like, did you know To Catch a Predator is not based in Los Angeles? Like, did you know that I've turned on the news in your fucking hometown too, and you guys have just as many fucking creeps, but your people just aren't rich,
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think that because there's the allure of having money and having success and having fame, so when you hear these people's crimes, you're like, devil, witchcraft, oh my God. And sure, do some people probably worship the devil? Sure. But it's not any, Hollywood is no different than Michigan, except for your people in Michigan, we don't
Not as
care about.
interesting.
Yeah, they're not as interesting. So it's like, but I think the one that is that Taylor Swift is a reincarnated witch from having, because she does have a doppelganger of this woman who's like a witch who was like on, I don't know, she was like on Maury, or she was on some
Mhm.
show back in the day. I mean, and they look identical. But everybody's got a doppelganger.
Yeah.
Everybody tells me I look like the girl from Westworld, and we do. And it's like, okay, so it's, but anyway, so her whole thing is that she's a witch who reincarnated down here, and that you know, when she does her concerts, she's able to take the energy of everybody, and that's how she is like powerful. And you know what? Sometimes it's fun to believe it and to be like, you know what? Yeah, but it's so hypocritical because you ever watch The Matrix?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And in The Matrix, he finds out it's all like fake, whatever. And then, he's the one, he defines reality and alters destiny. And so I'm like, okay, so now that he knows what the Matrix is, look at all of them. They're in the coolest outfits, black, fucking cool sunglasses. They're the badass. So it's like, yeah. So if she is a witch and she reincarnated down here, of course she's gonna make herself famous.
Yeah.
Why would you? Why would you not? Or do you think I'm gonna reincarnate and bust out of the Matrix and just be regular?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what if she is a witch?
That's so fun.
She's doing it right.
She's doing it right. I love talking to you. I could
Yeah.
talk to you all day long. Monterey
Yes.
Martinez, what do you have coming
Hi.
up? Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, Monarey, MONAREYM. And coming up, I'm actually doing the OnlyFans taping, not with my clothes off, just like the comedy taping. So I'm doing that in July 15th. So that'll be out, and I'm gonna start. We have to like make content on there now. So I'm trying to like build that up. So check me out on OnlyFans for comedy. Comedy
Love
only.
that. Thanks so
Yes.
much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.